Hello, thanks for tuning into this episode. Before we start, FinTech Focus TV is brought to you by Harrington Starr, global leaders in financial technology recruitment. Head to the Harrington Starr website and check the links below so you can download the latest copy of the Financial Technologist magazine. And also, we've got the TradFi and DeFi Era of Convergence documentary coming up. If you're interested in the merger of the two, please get in touch. Thanks a lot and enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to another episode of FinTech Focus TV with me, Toby. I am absolutely thrilled today to talk to a company I've been finding a lot about over the last month or so and introduce you to a really interesting person. It is Curtis Evans from Jacobi Strategies. Curtis, how are you?
Hi Toby, very well, very well.
Listen, lovely to have you in here. Thanks so much for making the trip across. We had a long chat, probably about 4 or 5 weeks ago, about the company. I've been looking into it a lot ever since, hearing great feedback from the guys who've been working with you. And we've got a great business that you're building here, and there's loads and loads to unpack on it. It's an international business all over the world, and I'm excited to find out a little bit more about it. We're going to go into lots of different bits about what you do and the problems you're solving, and your funding and growth after that as well. But before we get into the reads of it all, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, as you can tell, I've got an Australian accent, so I started my career back in Australia about 20 years or so ago. Started as an economist, so looking at sort of financial markets. I eventually transitioned over to Europe and into asset management. So worked at a lot of big investment companies for many years. And I guess while I was in the investment world, I was always experiencing technology, and I always felt like technology was both the enabler and the disabler at the same time. There was a lot of sort of frustration. So when Tony, the CEO and founder, was initially playing with the idea of this company, Jacobi. I remember seeing him at a barbecue in London only 6 or 7 years ago.
That's fitting as an Aussie, isn't it?
Exactly. That's where the good ideas come from. And we were talking about it. He was showing me the specs on an iPad, and I was like, yes, that is exactly what the industry needs. So I jumped at the bit to join the company.
That's literally where it came from. And where was it at that stage? Was it was an inkling? It was a existing business. It was his plan, or
So Tony had been working at one of the big investment groups in Australia as kind of the chief strategist in multi-assets. Had a very sophisticated investment position there, and I think the pain point that he was seeing, and it was interesting because I was seeing the same pain point, but from the other side of the world, was that they were needing to increasingly customize investment solutions and portfolios for sort of big institutional clients, but there was not really any technology around to help them get that to scale. And so that was kind of the initial pain point that Jacobi sought to solve. Can we come from, right? Yeah, so can we come up with technology that helps big investment groups to get more scale into their custom processes?
Because I think I said this to you when we first spoke, that there's been a traditional dearth of good technology within investment management for decades. And I think I mentioned to you that a couple of years ago I'd been to a CTO panel within the investment management space, and they were yearning for innovative companies to come out of the woodwork and ask me to help basically do a beauty parade of companies within that space. And it was a really, really interesting dinner that we had, and then speed pitching that went through. But it was really difficult to find businesses that were moving the needle and answering some of the many, many problems that had into it. And I think it's been traditionally a business sector, an area that have been quite backwards in terms of its investment and adoption of technology. And I think over the last 5 years or so, we've seen that really speed up, and we've seen a lot of interesting solutions come into the space. What have you guys found in that sort of thing? Has there been an appetite for that to come out?
Well, definitely. We've brought on some very large clients in the last few years, and that's a testament to there being the demand there.
Absolutely.
There is a need. And I think when you go and look in a lot of these big investment groups, what you find is there's a huge cottage industry of in-house building of tools, systems. And there's very good reasons for that because there's just not a quite neat plug and play out of the box third-party vendor solution for them. Or where you do get the traditional vendors coming in, and there's a lot of great traditional vendors out there that do a lot of great things, but there's still a lot of other stuff that has to happen around the edges. And I think that's where Jacobi's really seen a massive space and a bit of a dearth. we think of ourselves as really complementing a lot of these big, bombastic, robust technologies that you'd hear about in the market. And in some ways, our biggest competitor is that kind of in-house belief, we'll just get a few quants in the corner and a couple of coders to just plug around the edges.
Yeah. There's a lot more risk around that as well, isn't there? Traditionally.
Definitely, and I think that's the FCA has shone the spotlight on this, so put a lot more pressure on governance of processes. So in the past, I think investment groups are quite happy to kind of sponsor a quant team and get quants developing models, and there's a huge amount of innovation coming from that. But having quants code in the corner in the absence of infrastructure and proper governance around that is a huge risk in today's age. So we're seeing, I guess, a big trend that we're playing into is you're seeing groups really think about how do they kind of still encourage that innovation. They still want their quants to code, but how can they code in a better environment?
Yeah, and I think that sort of support for that through technology, and the word that keeps on coming out again and again over the last couple of years has been that interoperability, and the ability to utilise more tech and to make it seamless and friction-free for the end users. I'm interested in the fact that you sort of immediately took that from being, I guess, the inside man and seeing that sort of thing, saying, right, from the other side of the world, I'm seeing the same sort of issue. One of the interesting things for me about financial technology businesses is they can have great solutions to problems which they felt on a micro basis. What made you recognise this was bigger than a micro basis problem that can come out as a great idea to one or two people, but never have the investment and the buy-in? Because it's not easy selling to investment managers at scale, certainly the larger ones, and it needs to have something there that increases productivity, reduces cost, increases efficiency, etc., reduces friction. There's a sort of format of key tick boxes that they're looking for from it. Tell us how you fall into that category to not only just be doing well, but to be signing up some of the biggest companies in the space.
Well, I think where we get success is where a big company is really thinking from the top down, architecturally, about their mix of systems. Too often in the past, and this is kind of not just an investment management industry phenomenon, but often in big groups, what happens with technology is you build systems in response to the people and the way that you've designed your teams. And that's kind of great in isolation, but when you add that up, everything's disconnected. What's interesting about Jacobi is we don't really work like that, or our technology isn't designed just to be used by one investment team. Well, you could, but you're kind of missing out on the real benefits. And one of the big things that we promote with our technologies is used by these big investment teams to capture their custom processes. But they can simultaneously use Jacobi to then engage with their clients. So this concept of dynamic engagement with the clients of big investment groups. And too often in the past, big investment groups have treated that as a client reporting challenge, pretty boring. Here's a two-dimensional report. So we're trying to sort of break that, I guess that culture in the industry around, don't just have investment technology that starts and ends in the investment team. You've got to think about how this kind of rolls out sort of enterprise-wide, and how you can really bring your clients on the inside, get your clients closer to the investment sort of heart of the organisation.
That makes massive sense, doesn't it? So we've got a business there that's come from an idea around a barbecue that's prompted excitement, that's sort of changed your life to an extent in that sort of basis. The business is starting to move well. We have COVID-19 come up in 2020, and the world changes a little bit. Tell us about how you've been able to thrive as a company through that sort of period, and I guess companies that have thrived through that period have been the ones who've added real value to it. So tell us about your story through that sort of time.
I think like anyone, we saw that initial kind of knee-jerk, just let's stop doing everything. I think at that point, everyone was just basically trying to get their Zoom working at home and making sure their Wi-Fi was sufficiently fast. So we definitely saw...
Slack? I was learning Slack very quickly.
So we saw probably a few months where things, the new opportunities for us as a business just slowed.
Yeah.
But I think 6 months in, any kind of digital project in these big groups is like, hang on, we've got to get a bit more serious on this. So we definitely saw a huge pickup probably 6 to 12 months in, because these innovation strategies in these big investment groups really came to the fore. They could sort of, having people work remotely, or too many systems were still tied to individual PCs or individual PCs at the bottom of the basement of an investment firm, and then people are sort of VPNing in. But so we definitely saw a sort of big pickup post, I guess, the initial shock of COVID.
And so when you're dealing with that and there is that pickup, how did you position yourselves as a company that's sort of emerging at that time? And spread, you're in the UK. There's offices out in the States. There's offices in Australia. It's as I said at the start, it's a very much global business and spread across all of those sort of areas. Tell us about how you were able to accelerate the knowledge of Jacobi out into the marketplace at that time.
I'd say it's pretty hard, to be honest, because I think the industry is quite closed. It's quite a clubby relationship industry. I personally had a lot of contacts, but you exhaust them within about a month. But we've been persistent. We know that these problems exist in these large groups. We try and check in. We've tried to put a bit of emphasis on some of the thought leadership and sort of content around the problems that we're solving. I think to some extent that's resonated, particularly at the higher levels of these organisations where they're looking at these big themes and they're thinking we need to do something here.
And within that, and you're talking about we need to do something, and the clients who you've engaged with successfully and are embedded into their business. What's some of the feedback from those companies? What's some of the case studies there of saying, right, we had this problem and now look at us go? What's the benefits that you guys have been able to create for your customers?
Well, I think for a lot of our clients, what previously may have been a specific tool that sat on an individual person's desktop suddenly gets industrialized. So it's used by everyone in the team and the team next door. And so you can take something, and that could be intellectual property as well. That's the unique thing about Jacobi. Each of our clients get their own private deployment version of the software. It's completely ring-fenced, and they can code and develop their own tools onto the platform. So then they start developing something, and then suddenly they can reap the full benefit from their own intellectual property. So I think we've seen some really sort of great wins there where we've taken something in an investment group that was quite specific, quite clunky. It might have taken 6 hours to run, plus you needed Jeff or Sally to be in the office for it to run, into something that's actually click of the button and can actually be run by teams outside of that central team. So that's been, I think, where we've seen some great successes.
And that's efficiency, productivity, reduction of friction. It's all those key areas, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Really, the payoff for Jacobi for big investment groups is certainly the efficiency and the productivity, which I think of as a more defensive sort of thing. Governance is also the other thing. Course, risk management, as in just making sure your processes are more robust. And then lastly, but not least, new business potential, because you're getting clients closer to the investment heart of an organisation, which naturally means that they're engaging better. They've got better transparency. So for the investment groups, it means more business.
That's a great point. I think I've often thought there's a lot of similar things when you're looking at the formula for businesses that are succeeding at the moment. But that element of risk reduction and governance, as you say, is critical. But also that bit there about how does it make you win more business and get closer to the customers, and that UI part of it is such an important aspect which businesses need to, particularly in a space there where it's so important that you're building relationships with your customers and getting that stickiness. It's great that you can have technology that can really bring that further forward as well. We're moving through this COVID period, and you thrived and managed to sign up some incredible companies and add real value to your customer base. There's been some really interesting stuff that's happened to the business of late as well, where you've raised funding. And it takes us on to the next sort of scale of growth for the business. Tell us about what that looks like and what it means first and foremost for your customers, because I've spoken to you about this before. I know how excited you are about the business and where it can go and what this means. I know a little bit about the plans, which we'll come on to in a minute, but tell us why the funding, and then tell us what it means alongside that as well.
Yeah, so just a month or two ago, we closed a Series A funding round for $10 million, led by Queensland Investment Corporation, a very sort of prestigious investment group out there in Australia. Interestingly, we were a sustainable business before that.
Yeah,
we didn't have cash burn. We didn't have to fund, and actually, we were having conversations.
Which is the best way.
I think we've all come from investment management, so we're quite strategic. We're not sort of short, sharp thinkers, but we were thinking, well, should it be more? We wanted to fund because we wanted to accelerate. We wanted to accelerate the development and the expansion, and this really came off the back of these big client wins. So here in the UK, we work with groups like University Superannuation Scheme. They're the biggest pension fund in the market. legal and general investment management client we started working with about 9 months or so ago. They're the biggest asset manager in the UK, for instance. So we've had this real proof, of the product and confidence. We want to now accelerate the development in the technology, which for our clients is fantastic because they've been the early adopters. They have a very strong seat at the table in terms of influencing our product roadmap, and I guess we can now put more of that to work, or more of those ideas to work, to really develop the product and take it to the next level.
Talk to me about that, because I think that's really interesting. I want to put on that thread where you're talking about their input into the development of the product. Because quite often it's, this is what we do, we'll tell you what you want, we're the experts, etc., etc. It sounds like you're flipping that narrative on its head a little bit, which I think is exactly the right way to go. And I think there's a lot of businesses who I've been talking to that have increasingly had founders who come from product management backgrounds who are thinking like that naturally.
Yeah.
So their route to it is, in product management is let's find out what the customer needs, and it sounds obvious, doesn't it? But I think there's a really important bit that you just mentioned there about the why and what it can do for it. So how do people have that input into your strategy?
Well, all our clients we have a really close collaboration with. So we would normally, even after the onboarding, we'd normally be having discussions with them at minimum once a month. And those discussions kind of might start quite high level. What's going on in your business? How are they going with using the platform? We'll sort of educate them on anything new, interesting that we think could be relevant. But we use those forums to also try and solicit feedback. And it does work two ways as well. Like we sometimes will get a list of, what about this, this, and this, and this, and so we need to try and interrogate that and try and work out, well, what's really most important there. Well, sometimes it might be that as we explore it more with the client, we discover that actually it was a different problem that we think needs solving. So we try and do that collaboratively.
I love that. I think it's such an important part to that's partnership as opposed to sort of master servant, which is quite often in that sort of world, isn't it? The other side of growth, obviously, is saying, right, you're there, and it's the sort of point there where it's been a good, sustainable business with a good, strong foundation that could keep on going, but now it's time to accelerate. I know that means people, and it means the growth of the business around this as well. And speaking to you, there's a lot that excites me about the business, and for it to be a company to represent, for us to represent as recruiters in the day job. I love working with companies where you can get excited about it. I've spoken about some of the examples in the past of where we've grown with businesses and seen that sort of acceleration. So I want to talk about something which I've been talking a lot about recently to a lot of different companies, which is what makes it a great workplace. And I think it's a really interesting play at the moment, in that we're still in a super competitive world for tech talent, for salespeople. The best people should be in demand and have multiple offers on the table, which means that as employers, we've got to be really, really good at being able to say, this is what we're doing to look after you. This is why it's a great space. Now, I think the sort of size and scale and opportunity and the market share and the space that you're in, plus have a really strong proof of concept as a business, and yet such a large marketplace to move into, makes it super, super exciting. But I want to hear from you. Tell me about what makes it such a special place to work at the moment, and such a great opportunity.
I think what's good about working at Jacobi right now is every individual is very close to the client and feels the impact of their work. So a couple of examples would be, we brought on someone as a software engineer, Java developer recently, and he came across from, I won't say the name, but one of the huge Silicon Valley tech trillion-dollar firms. Real talent. But in his role previously, he was just a cog in a very complex machine, and he wanted to sort of feel the fruits of his labour more. And that same chap today is now developing the Jacobi platform, taking it further and further, but he's actually speaking to these big investment groups face to face and speaking to his equivalents, as in tech experts, but also non-tech experts. And so I think for him, that's been a real breath of fresh air. He feels like he's adding huge amounts of value, and he can see the value of that. And then another example is, we bring on investment engineers, both senior as well as juniors. So we've been sort of trying to cultivate, I guess, the next generation of quants and investment engineers. So we bring on smart mathematicians, those types of folks. One chap that we brought on recently, about a year or so ago, fast forward to today, he's a year in. he's developing all these different tools for some of the biggest investment groups around the world. He's on those calls with those clients on a weekly basis. And I know for a fact that sort of position in other places, you wouldn't be speaking to a client for 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not to say we throw everyone out to, we want to make sure we put our best foot forward with all our clients.
But it's the opportunity.
Exactly.
Right?
If these people prove themselves, which they do, they enjoy working there, and we want to give them that exposure, which then just spirals, really snowballs, and leads to the further development for them.
This is a breath of fresh air for me, because I think there's so many conversations that people, and look, we speak to people all the time about their things, and we make awards for great workplaces, etc. And traditionally, I've seen over the last 3-4 years that definition of a great workplace has really changed quite sizably. And I think actually it's reverting now to what really makes a workplace great. Now, I think that's about having a winning culture and a winning environment, and that's about making sure you've got a business there that's succeeding, that's growing, that's got potential to grow even further, and all the signs and evidence is there from everything we've spoken about so far for that to be the case. But then it's about how can I maximise my potential? How can I become really good at what I'm doing? How can I be developing and pushing myself out of my comfort zone all the time, and having the support and the backing and the trust to be able to do that? Now, when I'm glad you said exactly what we've spoken about there, because a few weeks ago we were talking about the same thing, and I was really inspired from that conversation about the faith and the trust you put into people to say, right, come out there and create your pathway and be trusted. Because I think there's so many different companies where people just get lost in the ether and stay in their lane and say that's what you do because that's your position or your level of experience. And you've got cracking examples of people who've not just come in to do a job, but also been trusted and elevated and moved themselves further forward as well. And that to me is the crux of what really makes a business exciting to work for. So when we were chatting about the business and what's exciting about where it goes, great product, market that needs the product, size and scale for growth, strong backing from companies that believe in it, great leadership team who've been around and know what they're talking about, and then a place there where you can get that action and an opportunity to move and create your career within it as well. So when can I start?
I'll send you the offer tomorrow.
It's genuinely really brilliant to hear that, and we're really enjoying working with you and being able to help on that journey. So speaking of the journey, let's move on to what it looks like. So we're moving. This will be out towards the end of 2022. We're October at the moment, and 2023 is fast upon us. Kids are knocking off the days now to Christmas, etc. And 2023 is a year where there's going to be, one thing is for sure in 2023 is volatility will have something to do with it. And as you've proven before, volatility creates opportunity and opportunity to do things better. So my guess would be that 2023 for you is about ambition and opportunity and continued growth and all those sort of things, irrespective of macroeconomic conditions. So tell us what we can expect to see. What's exciting for you in the year ahead? Yeah,
well, I think as a result of that funding, we're basically doubling our headcount over the next year or so. The structure's in place broadly. So that means we're going to be expanding the product engineering kind of function, so a mix of sort of software engineers, quantitative engineers. Also expanding, I guess, the product element, how we sort of define the product, how we develop the product and take that to market. And then lastly, the distribution side. And I'd say the distribution side, something we do increasingly look at is around sort of partnerships and integrations, because that has then a playback into the product and how suitable it can be for our clients and future clients.
In terms of future clients, people who are watching this at the moment and are saying, do you know what, that resonates with me. I can see that problem. I have it in my business at the moment. I've been waiting for this answer. Who should be reaching out to you at the moment?
Well, I mean, certainly reach out to myself. I'm on LinkedIn, and I think my email might even be on the website. But yeah, you can come through on our website. You can sort of access a little form to get in contact, but we're more than happy to have whether it be formal or informal conversations. Often we've been used as a bit of a a bit of a party trick, where we get brought into big investment groups where they want to just look at some new technologies, just to throw a few ideas out there, and we're more than happy to be involved in that, even if it doesn't necessarily lead to Jacobi being the right fit for them.
Yeah, I think that's so important, isn't it? Just to sort of be there and be able to give the honest advice. I think there's so many people who are just trying to engineer problems so they can provide the solution, when actually it's about, let's see if we are the right sort of fit, and if we do, if it's us, then great. If not, then we've had a good conversation, and that can lead on to stuff when the time's right for further down the line. So I'm gonna finish with a quick question, which is away from the company, but more about what we're seeing. I mentioned volatility earlier on, and I'm interested to speak to people right now at the end of this year, where we're starting to look ahead and thinking what lies ahead. So crystal ball sort of things. What do you expect to see? What's your outlook on the financial technology space, and what some of the exciting things that we could be looking forward to in the year ahead being?
I think it's only just begun. I think financial technology or investment technology is still maybe a decade behind maybe other industries. So I think that the investment management industry's under acute pressure. They've had a good time for a couple of decades in high margin businesses, but there's huge pressure kind of bubbling there. So I think we're just going to start to see an acceleration in the adoption of some of these newer technologies. I think bold decisions kind of have to be made. It's kind of getting to crunch time in a lot of these organizations. And for us as a company, I think that's, we're playing into that trend ultimately. Yeah.
Well, look, well positioned. Timing's everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
Curtis, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thanks so much for telling the story. I'm genuinely excited about the business and looking forward to seeing it continue to rise and rise. Love the fact of where it's come from, where it's heading. And I've got a good feeling about you guys. So thanks for coming on the show and sharing the story today.
Thanks for having me, Toby.
Good to see you.
Cheers.
And thank you all for watching. We'll see you soon on another episode of FinTech Focus TV. Thanks a lot.